Hello there. Welcome back to the basement again for the second time today. I had to come back because, obviously I dropped my Andor review earlier, and I have since gone to my more veteran, more knowledgeable sources to see what they have to say. And of course, all the comments from the fandom. And I was noticing that there was a lot of people were saying that they didn't feel like Star Wars, and the main reason is because no one talked about the Force and the music was off and all that kind of stuff. But my main thing is the Force and Force users. I don't think you need the Force or Force users for Star Wars to be Star Wars content. Just in general, I mean, Lucas, Mr. George Lucas, created a vast universe. Now, granted, the main movies that we all know and love, by that I mean the first six, um, obviously had a lot to do with, especially the prequels had a lot to do with the Force and the Jedi. But we also need to remember that in the OT, there were only, at the beginning of episode 4, there were only two known Force users in the galaxy at the time, Obi-Wan and Vader. By the end, there was Luke as a third one, but that was still it out of a galaxy of billions and trillions of beings. I mean, even by the end of the OT, they were down to just one known and one potential Force user, the Skywalker twins. That was it. So while the Force was talked about a lot in the OT, there really weren't that many Force users, obviously. Now, in the prequels, obviously, the Jedi Order still existed, so there was a shit ton. But one of the comments I read that really impressed me was on Josh's video that he put out on Andor about, his thoughts on it and other stuff, which is, do your thing, bro. I respect you. But a user made a beautiful point that I hadn't thought of. So that would be, yes, JFrizz2099. Give credit where credit's due, because I'm not a shiesty asswipe like that. His first thing in his comment was to quote the conversation between Luke and Han Solo on the Millennium Falcon while they were on their way to Alderaan right after they escaped Tatooine. Luke was asking, "You don't believe in the Force?" And I'm going to have to paraphrase here because my quote machine's a little off today. But basically, Han says, "Kid, I've been to every side of the galaxy and I've seen lots of strange things, but I've never seen anything that'll make me believe that there's one Force that controls everything." And then he proceeded to make the point that was everyone's attitude at the time, because the Emperor had been spending the last 19 years wiping out all history of the Force in the Jedi. No one fucking talked about it at the time. Nobody. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that we haven't heard about the Force in Andor so far, and don't be surprised if we never ever do. This is a part of the Star Wars universe. This is a part of that big-ass universe that George created that actually has jack squat to do with Force users on the light or the dark side. I mean, yeah, Vader and the Emperor are around, but they're so way up here, and the people and everything that Andor is dealing with is way down here. I mean, granted, you might see, Vader's shuttle on a flyby or whatever, and him walking down a hall or something when they get to Coruscant, but he's not essential. The Force isn't essential for this story. And for me, there's the galaxy that George created is just so freaking vast. The odds are that, 98% of the time, the Force isn't, especially in the time period being covered in Andor, the Force is basically non-existent, and Force users are non-existent. So, I mean, granted, that's why So you don't need it, especially, well, specifically for this show, you don't need it. But I also feel overall you don't need it in there all the time. There's so many different ways, well, different stories in general, and different ways, so many different ways to tell them in that monstrous galaxy that George created that, at times it could even be superfluous. I mean, just depending on when the story's set. I mean, even if you could set a story like in the High Republic, the Old Republic, when the Jedi were flourishing and all that stuff, but so much stuff was happening on so many planets like that the Jedi had absolutely nothing to do with. So, I mean, they would have known about the Jedi and Force users, but they wouldn't have seen them. More than likely. So, that for me, there's so many reasons why the Force being mentioned in Andor, or not being mentioned in Andor so far, is not a bad thing. And if we don't hear about it, period, won't be a bad thing. Again, Jay Freeze 2099, thank you for your input, because that's really what got my noodle going. So I appreciate that. Whoever you are. But yeah, just, for that, his reasoning and works for right now, or this show specifically, Andor. But just in general, if someone wanted to make a story set in the High Republic, it still wouldn't necessarily have to have Jedi in it. It could be on some backwater planet that the Republic at the time really doesn't give two hoots about. And since the Jedi are basically controlled by the Senate, they wouldn't have to give two hoots about it either. But there could be all kinds of goofy crap going on. Lots of interpersonal things happen everywhere. And if someone chooses to write a story based in George's galaxy about what's going on, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, as long as they do it well. And for me, they're doing it well so far with Andor. So, yeah, the Force and Force users, awesome. I love them. Obviously, it's what got Star Wars fans into Star Wars, because that's what George focused on in his 6 movies. But are they necessary for every Star Wars story that will ever be told? Nah. Not fam. It's not. Just give me a good story. Anyway, that's my thoughts on that little particular subject. And I wanted to share them with you. Actually, I kind of had to share them with you because my brain was... So, like, subscribe, comment, please. I want to interact with people. I want to have discussions, not arguments, not insults, discussions. So, interact. I want to interact. Please interact. And just remember, as usual, there's always a good time to be found when you're chilling in the basement.